Hey Az, in your video you give a excellent example of the process of radical interpretation. Yeah, I know you know what this term means, but it's easier to talk about something if you have a name for it. So let me just say that radical interpretation is this process of trying to establish communication with somebody when you don't share a language with that person. So you're trying to interpret them radically. In other words, from the ground up, basically. Yeah, so the example you give is you're going to France and you're talking to a taxi driver, and through this process of radical interpretation, you give a sign for you flash him a sign for the Eiffel Tower, and he takes you to the Eiffel Tower, right? Okay, so the claim is that during this whole process, okay, as long as we're achieving our goals, as long as we're getting the other person to do what we want them to do, we have no need of normative language whatsoever. Indeed, the only time we need normative languages is when we experience breakdown. When we find the other person is not doing what we want them to, and we are therefore not achieving our goals. Let me argue against this point. I'm going to argue against it by taking a page from Heidegger here. Okay, notice that it doesn't even show up, right? I mean, the idea that this whole process is a norm-governed process, it doesn't even show up until breakdown happens, right? When the breakdown happens, when we're not achieving our goals, then we're jolted into the realization that this whole process, using the symbols and all this kind of stuff, is a norm-governed process, and therefore we invent some normative language to indicate to the driver that he's taking us to the wrong person. Indeed, the very process of establishing this symbol, right, means that we have given the driver the opportunity to make a mistake. Okay, he can take us to the wrong location. Okay, wrong is a normative process, right? Okay, and yes, okay, normative language is particularly useful to get rid of this breakdown, to get the whole process back on track. Okay, but I'm going to argue that this is not the only place where you're using normative language in your scenario. Okay, I'm going to argue for this by moving the process of breakdown up further in the chain, right? Okay, so suppose you approach the driver and the driver just simply refuses to acknowledge you, right? Maybe we're talking about a French waiter here, not a French taxi cab driver, right? Suppose the person just doesn't acknowledge your presence at all, right? Now what are you going to do? Okay, we've achieved breakdown already, right? Okay, so all you can do is just keep attempting to engage the person in this process of radical interpretation, right? If the process of radical interpretation itself breaks down, then all you can do is just keep trying, right? Okay, so now, but since you've experienced the breakdown, the normativity shows up already, right? I mean, the gesticulations, the sounds you make, the waves to get the driver's attention, the overt attempts that you're making to engage this person in the process of radical interpretation, okay, this is a normative language, right? What you are doing is you're letting the driver know that you're imposing a norm on him. The norm is the obligation that he has to engage in the process of radical interpretation with you, okay? So the inevitability of normative language is the inevitability of engaging in the process of radical interpretation. And it's not like this scenario of radical interpretation is so hypothetical either, right? I mean, after all, we're not born knowing our native language. Each and every one of us, okay, learns our first language by radical interpretation, right? And our parents do this to us. They get our attention when they're trying to teach us a word, or when we're doing something we shouldn't be doing. This getting our attention, focusing us, telling us, what the correct use of the word is. This is all normative language, right? So we see that language is normative from the start, from the very first moment of radical interpretation. It's not like normativity comes in later when language breaks down. Language is normative from the very get-go, right? Okay, and then the same thing goes for your attempt to getting doctors to cure you, right? I mean, you're getting their attention, you're letting them know you're imposing a norm on them, and that they have to pay attention to you, right? And the same thing goes for your teacher example. So that's how I would argue against that you can just get rid of normative language. Okay, now I'll conclude with a question. Okay, it seems like you believe that the norms are there. Okay, so it seems like you think that norms can exist where no normative language exists. Okay, this seems kind of un-Wittgensteinian to me. Okay, can norms or anything else exist outside of a language game to create them? Thank you very much.